Is it possible that you have a trauma bond when your partner's infidelity and porn addiction comes out? Let's talk about it. So, if you don't know what trauma bonding is, it can be a sign of codependency in the relationship where both you and your partner have formed a toxic relationship and you're very dependent on each other for survival, for healing, and you've kind of lost this sense of identity between yourselves individually. There's a lot of like clinging and sometimes even controlling in these relationships, and it ultimately can spiral the relationship. But there is hope for healing in these situations. I want to talk first about the 7 stages of trauma bonding. So the first one is going to be love bombing, and this could be gift giving or just smothering your partner, but usually it has to do with flattery and giving them a lot of words, but the words do not match the actions. So this could be even like praise for your partner, but it's very like empty, and it feels like empty promises in these situations. And usually you're attracted to that loving type of behavior because it makes you feel good, it makes you feel loved, but then once you're hooked in, the behavior switches. So number 2 would be trust and dependency, and this means that your partner will do anything to gain your trust and dependency to keep you basically as an addiction in their life or enable them in their addiction. And so they will use like charming behavior or the love bombing to hook you back because they are dependent on you in some way, shape, or form, whether it's sexually, mentally, physically. They need you in the home to cook and clean, to take care of the kids, whatever it is. They need you in that situation, but they're still not taking accountability for their actions. And so they make you feel like you can trust them again, but they're constantly breaking that trust. And they're using a lot of the love bombing to hook you back in because they're dependent on you. 3 is going to be criticism. So after you've been love bombed and brought back into the relationship and you're back to doing what it is you were doing before, there's going to be blame and there's going to be critical behavior patterns in the relationship. And so this usually is your partner making you feel bad about yourself a lot. It can be like a lot of demeaning or devaluing behavior. Like one minute they'll be cleaning the dishes in the beginning, and you're like, wow, I've noticed that this change in behavior, but that's usually inconsistent and wears away. That's not healthy behavior. So ultimately, you get to a point in this, which is be stage 4, where you are upset, right? You feel violated, you feel betrayed, you feel like you've again, been abandoned or isolated, and it starts to spin cycle at this point. So you start reacting, right? Yeah, which is natural. You're very upset, and so you start telling your partner, this is how I'm feeling. But usually you've had a lot of passivity up until this point, and so now you're becoming aggressive in your tone and trying to get it across to your partner like, hey, this is not okay. But instead of listening to you and validating your feelings and changing their behavior for good, saying, I'm sorry, and meaning it, because that's what I'm sorry means, right? It means I see that this is causing you pain and I will change my behavior because I love you and I want to make you a priority in my life. So when their apologies are empty, they usually will get abrasive because it's triggering them, right? Whatever it is that you're saying to them is triggering them. And so instead of coming to you in a place of grace and empathy, they react. And so this starts gaslighting. So they start saying, you're crazy. You're just over emotional. Why can't you just get over it? Why are you constantly bringing up the past? You're just a thorn in my side, and then maybe even name calling, and cussing and things like that, where it becomes super verbally abusive. But all of this is technically verbal abuse. It's mental abuse because it makes you feel crazy. It makes you question your worth. It makes you question, am I really feeling this way? Am I valid for feeling this way? And so it leaves you very empty, and it makes you feel extremely isolated and alone. And so in a lot of ways, you start tolerating this behavior because you are made to feel like the crazy one. So now the cycle continues with love bombing, trust and dependency, criticism, and gaslighting. So stage 4 is the addiction. Now you are hooked on this person with the addiction of the love bombing and the addiction of the trust and dependency and feeling this false sense of safety, right? And getting pulled back in. You have that moment of what I call a spin cycle where you have the gaslighting. You're triggered, you go to him and he gets triggered, and so now you guys are in this like vicious spin cycle and you can't seem to get out of it. So there's the addiction on the partner. Stage 6, because you are having to either do one of 2 things at this point. You're actually 3 things. You're either suppressing your voice because you just want to avoid the conflict and not choosing to say anything, or you're becoming extremely aggressive and there's fights going on in the house, there's yelling and screaming, there's a lot of chaos, there's no peace in the home. Usually this happens because the passive response builds up into resentment, into an aggressive response. All right, so now there is this like loss of self because of that, which is stage 6. So there's a loss of self with feeling like I can't communicate my needs. And so over time, ladies and gentlemen, over time of doing this behavior, you actually lose yourself. You lose your identity. You lose a loss of self, you lose your self-worth, and it's really hard to build yourself back up from this point, which is where you usually have to go to therapy and start to rebuild yourself, because it's been so long since you've found your voice, since you've had self-confidence, since you've had self-worth, because your partner has dug away at that and chipped you away to where you have a broken heart and you really honestly don't know how to even speak up for yourself anymore. I've been here. It was so bad that I couldn't tell you what my favorite restaurant was. I couldn't tell you my basic needs, like, hey, I need to stop and go to the bathroom. I always felt like you may do this. Like women, you're in the car with your partner's like, you tell him, I have to stop and go to the restroom. And he's like, oh, really? We're like, we just literally stopped. We're like, you don't have to go. Do you really have to go? Sorry. And so you're like, well, that didn't go well, so I'm never going to do that again. And so you hold it, and hopefully one of the kids asks for the rest stop. That's an example of you not even speaking up for your basic needs. And then so number 7 is the final stage, where it is resignation and submission. And so this is where I just explained, in order to avoid conflict, you don't even speak up for yourself anymore. A lot of you are making your boundaries. You're using my link in bio for the boundary sheet, and you're setting these boundaries, but you're not holding yourself accountable to them, because it is very difficult for you to do that due to the codependency or the trauma bond that you have with your partner. And so you're either scared you're going to lose them, or you're extremely dependent on them at this point. And so it is like literally a lot of anxiety and stress. It is literally pulling away from an addiction, so to speak, when you have to set those boundaries and hold to them. So identify it, and then ask yourself this: am I willing to separate for a time and hopefully save my marriage in the long run, or my relationship in the long run? Or am I going to continue to submit to this bad behavior and lose myself in the process?